George was dying, and he knew it. Weighing over 600 pounds, the once energetic kindergarten teacher could barely stand in front of his class, let alone keep up with his young students. Each day was a battle to breathe, to move, to survive. But what happened next shocked everyone who knew him. This is the unbelievable weight loss transformation of George from too large. George Covington, a 45-year-old kindergarten teacher from Georgia, bravely shared his deeply personal weight loss journey on the first season of TLC's reality series Too Large. With a heart full of hope and vulnerability, George revealed that his motivation to lose weight was rooted not only in improving his health, but also in his desire to win back the love of his ex-girlfriend, Sensera, a fellow educator and close friend. From the moment he appeared on screen, George was candid about the daily emotional and physical struggles he faced. "For me, every day is a mental battle," he confessed. "I never imagined that this could possibly be my life." At the time of filming, George weighed so much that he joked he probably equaled the combined weight of 14 of his young students. Despite his size, his students adored him. Their affection was obvious. However, he shared that not everyone was so accepting, particularly some of the children's parents. "A lot of parents, they go to the front office and they complain about their kids being in my class," George said, clearly pained by the memory. "Is he going to be able to do this?" I had one parent say, "What if he falls on the kids?" These insensitive comments chipped away at his self-esteem and reinforced the painful stigma he'd experienced his entire life. George recounted that he had always been big. As early as preschool, he was put on diets, an experience that shaped much of his self-image. "Even in elementary and middle school, nobody called me George," he said. "Everybody described me as, 'Hey, that big guy.' So I was always defined by my size." This early labeling left scars. He recalled a particularly hurtful breakup in high school when his girlfriend told him no one else would ever want to be with him. That moment left a lasting impact. "It kind of made me feel like I wasn't good enough because of my size, like I wasn't worthy," he shared. From then on, George said he kept to himself, masking his pain behind a cheerful exterior. "I appeared to be happy and jolly, when deep down inside I was miserable." Food became his emotional refuge. As he transitioned into his career as a teacher, a job he truly loved, his physical activity decreased, and his weight climbed to dangerous levels. His mobility began to deteriorate. "When I come in my classroom in the morning, I normally stay at my desk all day because I can only walk about 10 feet or so before I have to take a breather," George admitted. Colleagues would often step in to help by taking his students to lunch or walking them to the buses. "I would love to be able to sit on the floor and teach with my kids or take them on field trips," he added, visibly emotional. "That does make me feel bad because it feels like they're missing out on something." Despite these physical setbacks, George was grateful to have a job and a purpose. "Most people my size, they don't even have a career," he said. "So I'm very blessed for what I do have, but there's so much that I don't have." One of the biggest voids in his life was love. George spoke openly about his loneliness and his longing for a relationship. At his size, dating was nearly impossible. He couldn't go out on proper dates due to his immobility, yet he considered himself a hopeless romantic. The person he couldn't stop thinking about was Sensera. "Sensera and I, we were in a relationship," George said. "We dated for about a year, and then she broke things off. Now we're friends, but I'm still in love with her." Their connection clearly remained strong, but it was complicated. In her own interview, Sensera acknowledged that George's weight had been a factor in their breakup. "George is so sweet, and I still do care for him," she said. "But I think he needs to do what he needs to do to lose the weight so he can go out more. Right now just isn't the time. But no one knows what the future brings, so we'll see." One photograph changed everything for George. Someone had taken a picture of him sitting on the couch next to Sensera. When he looked at the image, he didn't see a happy moment between friends. He saw pain and immobility. "It was clear I was not mobile and was miserable," he said. That image became a turning point in his journey. "I know that I'm dangerously overweight at this point in my life," George told the cameras with an unwavering seriousness. He described a long list of health concerns that plagued his daily existence: shortness of breath, severe sleep apnea that required a CPAP machine, water retention, and debilitating swelling in his legs. "I get tired walking from one room to another, so I have chairs placed throughout the building where I can stop and rest." He admitted something that many people struggling with extreme obesity often feel but rarely say aloud. "Every day I'm living, but I'm not living. I'm ready to do something. I'm ready to change my life." George Covington's journey on Too Large was not only a battle against the scale, but also an emotionally layered struggle involving his family, his health, and his fear of losing everything he valued, especially his ability to teach and to live independently. As one of 7 children, George's life had always been closely intertwined with the support of his family. But over time, that support had quietly morphed into a form of enabling that ultimately compounded his health crisis. His younger brother Willie appeared in the episode to offer a powerful and emotional insight into the family's dynamic and the fear that weighed heavily on them. Willie spoke with honesty and pain in his voice. "Our family's always taken care of George, fixed his meals, cleaned up his house. We never really said no," he said. "But now, when it comes to his health, we're terrified. Sometimes when he calls late at night or early in the morning, I get scared to answer the phone. Anything could happen to him at this point." The concern from his loved ones was more than warranted. George's health had deteriorated to a critical point, with severe mobility issues, sleep apnea, and his body straining under the stress of excess weight. He was living each day on the edge. Willie's heartbreaking confession brought home the reality. We want him to get help, or we're going to lose him. Understanding that his life was in danger and that he could no longer delay action, George made a life-altering decision. He scheduled a consultation with Dr. Charles Proctor, a respected bariatric surgeon based in Atlanta. This appointment for George symbolized the hope of a fresh start, but it was also a source of overwhelming anxiety. "I'm definitely starting to get nervous about getting on the scale," George admitted before his visit. "My biggest fear is that he says he can't help me. This surgery is my last resort." When George stepped onto the scale at Dr. Proctor's office, the number that appeared, 680 pounds, left him shaken. Standing just 5 feet 7 inches tall, George's weight posed a severe threat not just to his mobility, but to his life. Dr. Proctor didn't sugarcoat the truth. "You're one twisted ankle away from becoming immobile for the rest of your life," he warned. "You could lose your job and never work with those kids again." The moment was sobering. For George, who deeply valued his career as a kindergarten teacher and his connection with his students, the thought of never returning to the classroom struck a devastating chord. It was more than a health issue. It was a matter of identity, purpose, and love. Dr. Proctor told George he needed to lose 75 pounds in 3 months in order to be approved for weight loss surgery. The goal was ambitious but not impossible. However, it would require George to make a total lifestyle overhaul. That meant confronting his emotional eating, radically changing his diet, and incorporating regular physical activity into his routine, despite the limitations of his body. The 3 months that followed were marked by physical discomfort, emotional struggle, and self-discovery. George began to cook for himself rather than relying on family members to prepare meals. He focused on portion control, reducing sugar and processed foods, and trying to move more, even if it meant short, difficult walks or modified exercises. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, fatigue, and frustration. But George's determination carried him forward. With each pound lost, he gained a sense of empowerment. He began to visualize a life where he could take his students on field trips, sit on the classroom floor, and even take Sarah out on a real date. When the time came for his next weigh-in, George walked into Dr. Proctor's office with cautious optimism. He knew he had worked hard, but the scale would reveal the final verdict. As the numbers stabilized, it was revealed that George had lost 65 pounds, an impressive amount, but 10 pounds short of the target. While the result was disappointing, it didn't go unnoticed that George had accomplished a remarkable feat. Losing 65 pounds in 3 months was no small achievement, especially for someone starting at 680 pounds with limited mobility and significant emotional hurdles. Though he had not reached the prescribed 75-pound loss required for immediate surgery, it was clear that George was deeply committed to change. Dr. Proctor acknowledged his effort, but reminded him that the journey wasn't over. "You've made a lot of progress, George," he said, "but this process isn't about perfection. It's about consistency and commitment. If you can keep going, you'll get there." The moment was a turning point. Instead of defeat, George found motivation in his near success. He saw this not as a failure, but as a step forward in a long and ongoing journey toward reclaiming his life. After falling just 10 pounds short of the weight loss goal set by Dr. Charles Proctor, George Covington was given another 2 weeks to make up the difference and prove he was ready for bariatric surgery. Though disappointed in himself for not hitting the mark initially, George was still determined. This extension gave him a second chance, one he knew he couldn't squander. During those 2 pivotal weeks, George not only doubled down on improving his diet and increasing his activity, but he also focused on his mental and emotional health. He began working with a bariatric psychologist, a specialist trained to help patients navigate the psychological challenges that often accompany severe obesity and the weight loss process. For George, these sessions became a turning point, not just for his physical health, but for his understanding of himself. In their conversations, George opened up about the emotional wounds he had carried for most of his life. He talked about how, from a very young age, his identity had always been shaped by his size. As he explained to the psychologist, he had long believed that he needed to be extra kind, funny, or helpful in order to be accepted or liked. Beneath his cheerful exterior was a man who had spent decades feeling as though he wasn't good enough, especially when it came to love and relationships. The topic of Sarah inevitably came up. George had been open about his lingering feelings for his former girlfriend and current friend and co-worker. His desire to lose weight, in part, had been fueled by the hope of winning her back, but the psychologist gently helped him see a pattern he hadn't previously recognized. George was tying his self-worth to how others viewed him, particularly women he cared about. He had been trying to earn love by changing himself, rather than believing he was worthy of it from the start. It was a sobering realization, especially when George admitted how hurt he felt upon learning that Sarah wanted to remain just friends. Her words had stung, even though she had been kind and supportive throughout his journey. "She's sweet," George said. "I still care for her deeply. But I guess I was hoping if I changed, she'd change her mind." The psychologist's response struck a chord. George didn't need to change to be loved. He needed to understand that he was already valuable, already deserving of love and respect, just as he was. That shift in perspective didn't erase the pain, but it began to heal some of the emotional scars George had carried for years. He walked away from those sessions with a clearer sense of self, not as the big guy or the man who needed to win people over, but as George, a teacher, a brother, a man fighting for his life, and someone who had plenty to offer without begging for acceptance. As his final weigh-in approached, the world was also changing. The COVID-19 pandemic had turned in-person medical appointments into risky undertakings, and George's scheduled weigh-in would now have to happen virtually. He stepped onto the scale at home during a video call with Dr. Proctor, the moment feeling both surreal and deeply significant. His nerves were high. This number would determine whether or not he could finally move forward with surgery. The result? He had done it. George had lost the final 10 pounds, bringing his total weight loss to the 75 pounds required. The sense of relief and pride that washed over him was immense. He had fought through physical pain, emotional breakdowns, and intense self-doubt, but he had come out the other side with his goal within reach. Shortly after qualifying, George underwent his bariatric surgery. The operation was more complex than initially expected. During the procedure, Dr. Proctor discovered that George had developed large gallstones, a potentially dangerous condition that can cause serious complications if left untreated. As a result, George's gallbladder was removed during surgery in addition to the planned portion of his stomach. Dr. Proctor also removed about 2/3 of George's stomach, drastically reducing its capacity and altering the way his body processed food and hunger signals. Despite the unexpected complications, the surgery was successful. George came out of it not only with a changed body, but also with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. For the first time in a long time, his future felt open. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. He would still face strict dietary rules, the challenges of maintaining weight loss, and the ongoing work of nurturing his self-worth. But now George had the tools, the support, and most importantly, the belief in himself to keep going. He no longer viewed his journey as a desperate attempt to be accepted or loved by someone else. Instead, it had become a fight for his own life, his own dreams, and his own happiness. George Covington had taken the first real steps, not just toward a smaller body, but toward a fuller life. 4 months after undergoing life-changing bariatric surgery, George Covington had reached a remarkable milestone in his weight loss journey. The once 680-pound kindergarten teacher from Georgia had lost an incredible 124 pounds, bringing his weight down to 556 pounds. While the path had been far from easy, George now radiated a new sense of confidence and hope that had long been buried beneath the physical and emotional weight he carried for most of his life. To celebrate his progress, George decided to do something deeply personal and symbolic, something that would honor both his journey and his identity. He pulled out an old band uniform from his high school days, a relic from a time when he was a proud member of the school's marching band. The uniform, now significantly looser than it once might have been, became more than just a piece of clothing. It was a statement of how far he had come. Wearing it proudly, George organized a small gathering with close friends and family. In a moment filled with joy and triumph, he stepped out in front of them and performed a short march, just like he had done years ago on the field. Cheers, claps, and tears of happiness met him as he moved, more freely, more confidently, and more purposefully than he had in years. It was more than a performance. It was a celebration of resilience, progress, and self-worth. "My confidence is coming back," George told the cameras during his update. "I don't feel like I have to hide anymore. I feel like I have something to look forward to. For the first time in a long time, I feel proud of myself." A major shift had also taken place in George's emotional and romantic life. His journey began with the hope of winning back his ex-girlfriend and friend, Sarah, a relationship that had ended before filming began. At one point, she had expressed that while she cared for him, his weight made a romantic relationship too difficult. That heartbreak had pushed George to seek change, but now, with several months of personal growth behind him, his perspective had evolved. "I think the two of us are always going to be friends," George said. "But I do feel like it's time for me to move on and find someone who is going to value me the way I will value them." His words marked a powerful turning point. No longer seeking validation from someone who couldn't offer him the kind of love he needed, George had come to understand that his worth wasn't tied to who loved him back. It was rooted in who he was as a person. And now, with renewed self-esteem and a lighter heart, he was ready to open himself up to new possibilities. As part of this new chapter, George decided to put himself back out there romantically. He invited his longtime friend Latrice over to his home for a special dinner. This wasn't just a meal. It was a symbol of forward momentum, an intimate moment to show her, and himself, that he was ready for a meaningful connection. The atmosphere was warm, relaxed, and full of laughter, the kind that comes from years of friendship, but now with the potential for something more. George had always described himself as a hopeless romantic, and even though his heart had been bruised in the past, it hadn't hardened. If anything, it had grown stronger, more open, and more discerning. That dinner with Latrice was just the beginning of a new kind of journey, one where love might finally find him not in spite of who he was, but because of it. What do you think about kindergarten teacher George's admirable journey? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye!